Well, this morning I'm going to be speaking out of Psalm 23. It's one of my favorite Psalms. It's one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible. And before we do that, though, I want us to take a look at this really cute video of a father coaching his daughter to recite Psalm 23. Let's take a look at this.
Okay, the Lord is my shepherd. I'm looking at the camera while I'm doing the Bible verse.
Okay, good.
Why still looking at the camera too?
Oh, okay.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Surely, prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now my head, you anoint my head with oil. Surely,
My cup.
my cup, okay. My cup overflows. Surely, yes? Surely goodness will follow me all the days of
Surely
my life.
goodness and love.
Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
That is such a cute video. I really love it. And you know, Psalm 23, it's one of those really well-known chapters of the Bible. It's probably up there with John 3:16 in terms of how many people have heard it. But what's really fascinating about this is it was my very first recital. I actually had to recite Psalm 23. And I nailed it in a really bad way, like I totally didn't do well. I couldn't get more than a few syllables without just breaking out into uncontrollable laughter. And I was at a Lutheran school, so they didn't find it funny. And the girl that I was reciting it with, she didn't find it funny. She's like, "You're ruining my big moment." And I mean, we're little kids, so I mean, get over it, you'll grow up. But it was in that moment that my mom realized, I don't think we're meant to be Lutheran. I think we're going to become Pentecostals. Because Pentecostals know how to laugh, right? And so we became Pentecostals after that. But what's funny is I went to a school, a Lutheran school, where we actually had corporal punishment from the principal. So if you got out of line, which I did often, they would paddle you. And my mom was on speed dial, and I think my name was engraved on the paddle. And so my hope, though, is that one day my daughter, Evangeline, will be able to recite Psalm 23. And right now she's not able to. I tried. But she's really getting good at propitiation. And so actually I have a video that we can show you that will prove. Propitiation. Hi, Evie. I have a quick question. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you say propitiation?
Creation.
Okay. Do you know what propitiation is? Mm-hmm. What is it?
Jesus!
Yeah, you're so right. High five. Okay, specifically, can you say that it's God's substitutionary atonement in Christ Jesus?
Atonement in Jesus.
So what's propitiation?
Jesus.
Yeah, good job. High five.
We did?
We did it.
Now we can go see chickens.
Yeah, now we can go see chickens.
And we can get chocolate milk.
You want chocolate milk?
And you too.
I want chocolate milk?
No, we both want chocolate milk.
Okay, we both want chocolate milk. Let's go get chocolate milk. Yeah. And then see the chickens.
Yeah.
All right. I had no idea that I wanted chocolate milk, but I did. And then to prove it, we did get chocolate milk. Here's an image of us drinking our chocolate milk together. I know, she's adorable. And you know, turn to your neighbor and say, you used to be that cute too. Well, this morning, I really hope that we get to gain a deeper appreciation for what Psalm 23 is saying. You know, I want to give a little bit of context. When I used to think of Psalm 23, I actually used to think it was like a cute poem about a sheep walking hand in hoof with his master. But really, there's a deeper, intimate meaning in this psalm. The key theme is actually surrender. And just as the Christian life is fully found in surrender, David understood that his kingship had to be marked by one of surrender to the shepherd that is shepherding him. And so King David, he wrote this. And what's incredible is that David is known as one of the ultimate shepherds. He was well known. He killed lions, he killed bears, he killed Goliath. Man, this guy, he's a shepherd king. In fact, that's actually what his kingship was known as. It says in Psalm 78, 70 and 72, it says this: He chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he brought him to be the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands, he had led them. See, in this psalm, David is no longer speaking as a shepherd. In fact, he's saying, I too am a sheep. And it's an incredible moment of humility where the opening line is, the Lord is my shepherd. And then he says, I lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. If you're taking notes, this is really our first point. It's in the psalm, we surrender my needs. We get to surrender my needs. It says that as the Lord being my shepherd, I can understand that I will lack nothing. Often God is kind of like a doctor. And you know how when you go to the doctor for a checkup, he might say, hey, is there any tenderness anywhere? Are you feeling any pain anywhere? And then you might be like, oh, my elbow's a little sore. And then instead of him just saying, okay, well, here, do this and do this. No, what does he do? He starts pressing on it. And you're like, ow, 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 what are you doing? Ow. And he's like, well, I'm just seeing, because it shouldn't be sore, so I'm seeing how extensive the soreness is. And so he's like checking, and you're like, ow, ow. And then God will do the same thing. He'll look at our lives and he'll say, okay, how's your heart? And then he'll start pressing on your heart and like, okay, that's pretty good. How's your mind? Oh, kind of hollow. Okay, lacking, but pretty good. And then he'll reach around here and he'll start poking, ow, ow. And he's touching our wallets. And we're like, ow, ow, what are you doing? He's like, oh, that shouldn't hurt. And you're like, stop, ow. He's like, wow, you really don't want to give from your wallet. And I'm like, Lord, don't touch me there. That's my no-no square. And really what God is saying, he's not after our wallets. It's really indicative of where our heart is. And so sometimes we're like, God, why are you trying to rob me? God's not trying to rob you. No, God is not interested in your finances. He's interested in your heart. And in fact, he's not trying to rob you so much so that he is actually trying to give you something of eternal value. It says this. It says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I, this is Jesus, have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The abundant life that Jesus is promising, it's protection, it's fullness, it's provision, but it's found in a posture of surrender. Continuing in Psalm 23, it says this: He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. I don't know a lot about sheep, but I do know they're pretty dumb. And sheep need a shepherd. And often I'm wondering, God, why are you comparing us to sheep? Why not eagles or wolves or ninjas or something really cool? But sheep, really sheep? And the point is clear. Sheep need a shepherd. There's no other livestock that needs as much direction and care and special attention as sheep. And so our second point is this: surrender my direction. Surrender my direction. When we're following the shepherd, we actually don't get to decide the direction that we're going. We get to decide whether or not we're going to choose to follow his direction. You see, and it's actually a freeing moment because I don't have to worry about where I'm going. I need to worry about who I'm following. And so that's why when David is penning this psalm, he's saying, you know what? I get to have everything I'll ever need, and I get to be directed by the one who's going to take me down the right paths. Last week, Christina and I, we went on a little road trip. But before that, she told me, hey, Chris, I got to keep a few things frozen, and it's a 16-hour drive. I'm like, how am I going to do that? I'm going to keep things frozen. So I thought, dry ice. So I realized that Albertsons had some dry ice available, so I drove over to Albertsons. They were out. And so I'm like, okay, where am I going to get dry ice? I remember seeing it at Winco. So I start driving over towards Winco. I'm heading down Echo Hollow, and you know that intersection where Barger is? So I'm coming up to that intersection, and it's still green, but as I get closer, it turns yellow. Now, we're taught from an early age that green means, and red means, and yellow means go faster, okay? It means go faster, absolutely. So, I used to think they were called YOLO lights, like you can just go right through it. But something within me just said, slow down. And I'm like, there's tons of time. I'm like maybe 20 feet away from the line. And so I did something that takes a real man to do. I stopped at a yellow light. And as soon as I came to a stop, a truck just sped through their red light. And I would have been hit. And what I realized is, I think God was directing me. Because normally I would have just gone through. And I was like, oh my goodness, Lord, you just saved my life. This is incredible. So I went and got the dry ice, and I came home and I told Christina, I almost died. And she's like, I'm really glad you didn't. And so she cares. And in Proverbs it says this, there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. This proverb is so good that God actually repeats it. He says it in Proverbs 14:12 and then again in 16:25. We must allow God to have the opportunity to interrupt us. We must give him permission to say, Lord, at any point in my day, have your way. It's funny because we were talking about how we had the concert a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, wow, there's so many people here. We gotta put more chairs. And so I'm doing a count. Pastor Steve asked me, hey, Chris, can you just count all the people and how many empty seats? And so I'm starting to count all the empty chairs and all the people. And then someone interrupts me, and it's like, in the middle of me counting. And you know how hard it is to keep track of counting when someone's talking to you? So I felt like God was saying, stop and listen. And so I was like, okay, I'll just stop counting. And then they actually asked me to pray for their father, who was having a heart condition and needed to undergo open heart surgery. And so in that moment, if I had just brushed them off and kind of said, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm busy right now, I would have missed an opportunity to pray for a need that God was trying to use me as a conduit. And so we must allow God these opportunities to interrupt us. The truth is, when we allow ourselves to be led by God, we find rest along the way. It's almost impossible for sheep to actually be made to lie down unless 4 things are met. There must be a definite sense of freedom from fear. I'm no longer a slave to fear. They have to be free from tension, aggravations, and hunger. And that's really the point of our next verse. It's this: even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This is actually the part of the psalm that it changes from it changes from third person perspective to first person. You are with me. He's saying, Lord, I will not be afraid because you are with me, your rod and your staff. It's a direct address in first and second person to Jesus, saying, like, you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And this is where we get to surrender our emotions. Surrender my emotions. Now, David's not saying we just ignore our emotions. He's not saying that we don't feel the way we're feeling. He's not saying that what we feel doesn't matter. No, in this part of the psalm, he's actually saying that no matter what I'm facing, I know that God will comfort me. God will comfort me. The word comfort actually refers to the way that the shepherd, he uses his instruments to reassure the sheep of his presence and to ward off beasts that would try to harm the sheep. And so that word is really saying, like, as you comfort me, I can find emotional stability in your presence. So the Lord wants to comfort us with his presence. There's nothing like Christ's presence to dispel the fear or the panic or the terror of the unknown. Another way we could say this is, I get to surrender my comfort. You know, sometimes we want to live in comfort, but God doesn't promise that we're gonna fly over all the valleys, we're gonna fly over all this and that. And why does he say we have to go through the darkest valley? Why does it have to be the shadow of the valley of death? That sounds so horrible. Why couldn't it be like the hilltops of succulence and the shores of serenity? No, it's the valley of the shadow of death. And what God's saying is life happens. And life will happen. But he will be with us in those moments. His rod and his staff will comfort us. He won't leave us. He won't forsake us. He will be there in those moments. And one of the most faith-building exercises that I can recall is to look back on those dark moments in my life and on those valleys that were so hard to traverse and those things that really got me down and just recount God's faithfulness. And as we remember how God was faithful and how he was present, it really starts to build our faith. Moving along, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. You know, one of the most vulnerable places that you and I could be in is eating. You know, when you're eating, a lot of your defenses go down. And so when I read this, I was thinking, what are you doing? There's like wolves sitting at this table and you're sitting there eating? It's like you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What God is saying is he will protect us to the point where we can let our guard down completely, knowing that he is going to protect us. And so if you're taking notes, this is our fourth point. Surrender my problems. Surrender my problems. A year ago, Christina and I, we were going on a date night and we wanted to go fishing. I really wanted to go fishing because, you know, I wanted to show her how good at fishing I am. You know how it is. And so then we have this inflatable raft. So we go kind of like an hour and a half out of town. There's no reception. We start fishing. I bought her a license, so we did it legally. So we're fishing, and then she's like, okay, so how do I do it? I'm like, oh, well, you put the bait on like this, you know, and then you cast it like this. And then immediately she starts catching fish. I'm like, beginner's luck. And the whole night, I caught nothing. Like, to the point where she could tell I'm getting more and more frustrated. So I'm like, I'm switching poles. Like, maybe it's the pole. No, maybe it's this. And then, like, I would hold a pole for a long time, nothing. And she's like, here, take this one. And then I'd hand it to her, and as soon as she grabs it, fish on. I'm like, what is happening? I'm supposed to be teaching you. And so I'm getting frustrated. We're still fishing, and then the sun starts going down. It's like, okay, it's getting dark. We got to go. And then she's like, honey, I think someone's over at our tires, or at our car, and they're looking at our tires. So I'm like, oh, we better row in. So we went in. They're gone by the time we get in. They slashed our tire. I don't know why. This was just a terrible day. I didn't catch anything. She caught all the fish, and someone slashed our tire, and I can't find the spare, and we have no reception. And so, I kid you not, I used fish bait and duct tape to try to like plug the hole. It kind of worked. Filled up the tire. We hobbled onto the main road, maybe down a little ways, and I'm like, I can't find any reception. I pull over because I can feel that the tire went flat again, so I got to go pump it up again. While I'm out there, a big truck comes and he parks right behind us. He's like, y'all need any help? And I'm like, honey, go in the car, I got this. Could be dangerous, I don't know. And so then he's like, hey, I'm coming from a prayer meeting and God told me to leave early and you might need some help. I'm like, are you an angel? And then it was pretty incredible. And then I'm like, yeah, do you have reception? And as a matter of fact, I do. And he had reception, so definitely an angel. So then he's like, hey, God wants me to pray for your wife. I think she's pregnant. You don't ask a woman if she's pregnant. But what's crazy is we had just found out that she is pregnant with Elizabeth. And this is before we told anyone outside of our family. And so there's no way this guy could have known. So he starts praying. But what's ironic is in this whole situation, while God is providing for our every need, I'm thinking about how I want God to smite those slashers, the ones that slashed our tire. And I'm a pastor, and I'm not very forgiving right now. And I'm like, oh, Lord, would you just get them? Just get them. And God's like showing his love and grace and mercy and provision. I'm like, just smite them. But it's incredible to see that in the presence of what we can deem an enemy, God will provide his protection, and he'll give us everything that we absolutely need. So we get to surrender our problems. In Romans 8:28, it says this, and we know that all things, how many things? All things. God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. When it comes to God, there are no problems that are too meaningful or too menial. He can handle it all things. And I love that about our Father, that when we focus on our problems, it really magnifies the problems. But when we focus on our Father, it magnifies his solutions. And Peter got to experience this when he was in the raging waves. When he took his eyes off of Jesus, he began to sink. But then when he was fixed to Jesus, he was able to walk on water. And this brings us to my favorite and the last verse. It's surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know the old adage, we don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. We don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. See, God's goodness and faithfulness, they actually actively pursue us. It's funny, there's a word in this psalm that it's kind of out of place. The word is pursue, right? But it's a hostile word. It's the word that David would use to describe his enemies when they are pursuing him and chasing him down, like when he's running from Saul and hiding in caves. He's being pursued. But in the same way that an enemy might pursue David, he's saying, your goodness, your mercy, your love, they pursue me. They chase me down. They provide for me. Lord, you are good. I get to surrender my future into your hands because I know who holds my future. You see, when we look at Psalm 23, we actually get to see a beautiful song of surrender. You know, and we can sing surrender because often we think surrender means we're defeated. It means we've lost. We've given up. But in this context, surrender means that you get to claim ultimate victory in the things that you had no hope of overcoming without Jesus. That's what it means to surrender. To say that, Lord, I thought I could overcome these problems without you, but I'm realizing that apart from you, I can't do anything, but with you, I can do all things. All things are possible. And so right now, that's really the heart with which we look at this psalm. That I get to surrender my needs. I get to surrender everything that I own. I get to surrender everything that I have, everything that I've become. I get to surrender it to the one who made me because I get to surrender my needs, my directions, my emotions, my problems, and my future. And that's what it means to surrender.